Thank you, Tanya, for having this conversation with me. You are no doubt one of the most interesting people today in application security space. How did you get there? Did you think about this when you were a little girl? I mean, you are now leading an OWASP chapter.
When I was young, all of my aunts and almost all of my uncles were computer scientists. So all of them took computer science, all of them did programming. And I remember one of my uncles making us a computer and writing a program for it so it could actually talk. So we're like 8 having a computer talk to us. Hi, Tanya. And, so then I started programming as a teenager, and then I studied computer science. But I switched to security because I did programming just forever and ever. And then I didn't have very good interactions with the security teams at places where I'd worked. So when I was younger, I briefly went into a security role, but more like as the system administrator, like information security, protection of data sort of thing. And I didn't have a very good time. So I went back to programming, but then I met an ethical hacker, and he was in a band and played music, and I actually have always been in bands and played music until the past 3 years when all I've been doing is traveling. And so our bands, of course, had to play together. And then he kept telling me, you should become a hacker, you'd be so good. And I was like, I don't know. Software development's pretty much the best. But then I discovered all the things I could do doing security testing. And so I switched into security testing, but I found very quickly that security testing wasn't enough for me, if that makes sense. And I still wanted to interact with developers all the time. And I found like I would just go to, like as a pen tester, I would just go to the developer's desk and start working with them. And then I would teach them stuff. And eventually I found out, because I did not know, that application security was a job. And that could just be your job. Like you do testing sometimes, but you also do threat modeling and whiteboarding and all of the other things together to make up ensuring the whole process is secure. And I was like, oh, that's where I need to be. So it's kind of like a weird, most people don't have a person actively like dragging them into the industry. I feel pretty special when I hear the struggles of so many other people. And like the place where I was working, Elections Canada, they ended up switching me from the dev team to the security team, and just like all of these things kind of, yeah, I feel very lucky that I had such a pleasurable experience entering our field compared to some people who really struggle.
Yeah, they definitely do. We're talking a lot about DevOps these days. In fact, the whole newsletter that we are publishing is dealing with DevOps. So how does one go about addressing security concerns these days in DevOps environments?
So that question could be a book, but I would say that the AppSec people need to adjust the way they're doing security. Like in Waterfall, we would be a gate. Does that make sense? So yeah. You would have to jump through these hoops, and then you can go to the next thing. But that doesn't work very well in DevOps, because they want everything to be automated. They want everything to go really fast. So I find that there's a bunch of strategies. So one would be breaking your security activities into sprint-sized bites. So for instance, if you're going to do a code review, only review code from that sprint, or only do like a certain feature set or a certain amount, or do the APIs or whatever, so that it fits into a sprint, and then you can give them the results to fix in the following sprint, and make sure there is time in the following sprint for them, like allocated for them to fix those things. Another thing could be adding some security testing to the pipeline. So for instance, scanning to make sure no one's checking in a secret, like a password with a username combo, or for instance, a hash of something. if you can just do a check for that, that's very, very quick, especially if you're just checking the delta. So just the parts of the code that have changed that are being checked in, you know, if people are checking things in 10 times a day, they don't want to wait 25 minutes every time. So if you're just checking very, very quick things and things that are very important, that could be something that developers would be okay with, as opposed to sorry, a lot of places I've seen, they try to put, for instance, a SAST product in, and then the SAST product is trying to scan the whole thing, and it's like, okay, well, I'll see you tomorrow when it's done running. And yeah. I'm like, we can't really do that now. So another strategy that I've done before is creating another pipeline. So most of the pipelines that we talk about, they do all these tests and they promote it from, you know, like a dev server where some tests are run there, and then to another place and another place and another place. And then it goes to prod, ideally, and it goes out into the world and people get to use that software. But you can create more pipelines. So for instance, if you're doing infrastructure as code, you would have another pipeline that would publish your infrastructure. And then if you're doing APIs, you would have another one that publishes your APIs. So why not duplicate one of those and then run your in-depth security testing, but don't have it go to prod. Don't have it go to all the environments, just have it go to one place that's allocated for security testing, and then run your 18-hour SAST. And do that maybe once a week. Just like have it kick off and it tests, you know, this API, or it tests this infrastructure as code, or of course, ideally your application. And so then you're not blocking the prod release, and then perhaps just running your SAST product only on the delta of that one tiny piece of code, or get, you know, train your software developers that are approving pull requests to do secure code review, and tell them, like, you need to do that on each commit. And then once a week, we're running the full SAST, and then we are going to evaluate, you know, the results, which will take a human another day or two, maybe, right? Like you can't just like send SAST results to a developer. Like that's just mean. That's developer cruelty.
So it's basically everything all around how to get fast feedback and get it often, and try to figure out how to implement this security as fast as possible in the process.
And working within their processes.
Yeah.
That's really important. Like we can't break their processes with our work. I think that would be those two things: fast feedback and don't break all the stuff.
Yeah, that's very important. Not to break the old way of working. Not to intervene with some additional processes that will definitely make life more complicated for the devs. Yeah, sure. As long as we are talking about making life complicated to developers, we see organizations increasingly moving to the cloud, and this makes life much easier for developers. But how do you look at it from the security perspective? Does that make things more difficult or easier also?
So moving to the cloud is complex. So once you're there and everything is moved to only one cloud provider, it could be simpler because you don't have to worry about certain parts. So all cloud providers, like public cloud, have this thing called the shared responsibility model. And basically they just handle a certain amount of security for us. So if you're using platform as a service, they are patching it and that's it. And you just don't have to worry about that. And that's really nice from a security perspective. They also have certain monitoring tools that are just automatically implemented. You also can have better visibility as to what's going on because they want to charge you for things. And so then you can see all of the things, or otherwise they can't charge you for them. But in your own data center, you just pay the final bill and you can't necessarily know, oh, there's 25 APIs living on that server over like in that closet, right? So in that way, it's easier. But usually from what I'm seeing from all my clients is that it takes 3 to 5 years to actually migrate. And during that time, you are trying to secure this hybrid situation where you have half your stuff on-prem in your own data center, and then half is in the cloud. And what I'm seeing from a lot of clients is they've acquired a company, and then they're in a different cloud. So that's even better / more
Multi-cloud.
complex. And then they're trying to manage like one identity system for all of them. And then they have software coming out in all different places. So, oh, we're using Azure and we're using Azure DevOps, and oh, we're using AWS, and then we're using Jenkins and AWS, and then, oh, on-prem we're using Bamboo and Circle CI, and then some of us are still waterfalling. And I'm like, no! and it hurts. And that is what's actually happening to most companies. So like a lot of them are like, oh, we're such a failure. It's been over a year and we're still transitioning. I'm like, no, you're 100% normal. Don't worry. You're not doing something that the rest of industry isn't doing. We need to prepare you to make sure you're secure. So there's a lot of problems with, for instance, all the staff needing to learn this new cloud, right? And that adds extra complexity and cost. So is it more secure to be in the cloud? I feel that if 100% of your stuff is there in one cloud only, and you're using the cloud native tooling provided, some parts are more secure by default. But you still have to secure your software. That's your job. You still have to choose secure configurations because they let the clients decide, because otherwise people get angry. Like if it were up to the security team at any of these clouds, they would be like HTTPS only, TLS 1.2 or better. That like it'd just be like, no. Like, because that's why I would be like, all of you are using content security policy header, or you're not going to prod. But in reality, all those conversations are negotiations with your dev teams, right? And sometimes there's business reasons and justifications and sign-offs and acceptance of risk that you as a security person are like, no. But yeah. So is it more secure? Some parts, if you're 100% in the cloud, but almost no one actually is 100% in the cloud unless you're a startup, or you're magical, or you made your own cloud. So Microsoft's all the way in Azure, probably, right? And
Sure.
Amazon's all the way in AWS, and Google, but the rest of us are messy, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think you said a really nice thing about negotiating with developing people about these rules, because definitely one of the reasons why when security people are looked at, like some negative guys, it's mostly when they come with a checklist and they tick boxes and force people in dev teams to do something which is never a good way to do it. So yeah, negotiation is probably the best way to deal with this in the teams.
Yes, and listening, because sometimes they actually have a really good reason.
Yeah.
Not all the time.
Yeah. They say that development people are usually not mean, and they do not want to, do all the insecure things by default. There is always some kind of reason why they need to do it. So maybe we need to look at the technical debts or something, or some deadlines or stuff that are driving them to move in the wrong direction.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
You saw a lot of organizations moving to the cloud. What are the most common security mistakes that you see people do in the cloud?
So one mistake that I have seen a handful of times is, in my opinion, a mistake is using different identity systems. So having one identity system on-prem in your own data center, and then having a different instance of it up in your cloud, and then trying to have some sort of weird syncing thing. And what this has resulted in is a contractor quits, but they can still access everything in your cloud, or they can still log into your data center. And also, people not having access they should, and just like so much administration, like so much extra work. I'm like, no, just use one and have it go over both, right? Like that's painful. I also see, I have seen places not using secure defaults and templates. So for instance, so back in the day when AWS first started as the first public cloud, they they had these storage buckets that were by default really open, and then, you know, malicious actors got into them. And so now all the cloud providers, by default, the templates are they're quite secure. They're locked down. Like, I remember trying to open up an Azure container and it taking me 15 minutes to figure out how to make it publicly accessible on purpose. And so that's good. However, if you don't, as an organization, set up a template and make a decision about that and set up alerting. So me as a developer, if I'm peeling off all the security, maybe I think I'm doing something that's okay. I'm like, oh, no one will ever see that, or whatever reason that someone would have for doing that. If you have alerting set up on that, or a policy that alerts you that this has happened. So all the cloud providers have like little monitors all over the place. And so you can set it up, like if they change from this template, alert us. And then you would just know instantly. So I see a lot of groups not taking advantage of those like automatic alerting on dangerous behavior sorts of things. Like, I also see a lot of people not taking advantage of the free things from their cloud providers. So like if you're paying for AWS, Azure, or GCP, and I think Heroku, but I'm not 100% sure, but they offer like these free security tools. So in Azure, because that's the cloud I'm used to, because I used to work for Microsoft, they have Security Center, and there's a paid version, but the free version will tell you like they're breaking your policy, or they're breaking this, you know, CIS benchmark, or this is not ISO 27001, whatever. Like, you should always be using that. It's free.
Definitely.
Right? Like, and it's essentially doing like a VA scan of your entire environment multiple times a day and telling you like, oh, these websites are not forcing HTTPS, or like this has, you know, this older version of SSL, or this has cores set to star. You probably don't want that. No, I don't. Thank you. Yeah. Right? And so it alerting you to all these things, like, to me, that's like, it's like a free security tool. And it's not technically free because you are paying for the cloud, and but you are paying for it, so you should use it. I feel like that's a big mistake. I also feel like some people move to the cloud and they don't understand the shared responsibility model. So I was giving a presentation on behalf of Microsoft one day when I worked for them, and I was talking about infrastructure as code. And I was talking about, so if you're doing infrastructure as code, you are responsible for your security settings, and you are responsible for patching or like re-releasing a more secure version or whatever. But if you're using a platform as a service, you don't patch a platform as a service. They do that for you, but infrastructure as a service, you must patch it. So if they give you a Linux virtual machine, you know, and 6 months from now, if something happens, you better have been patching that whole time, right? Like, they gave it to you in an updated, good format, but then what you've done to it since then, like, that's your business. Yeah. And he fought with me after question period for 20 minutes, telling me like I didn't know what I was doing. And he was so confident, I actually questioned myself for a minute. And so then I went to go speak to the rest of the infrastructure team, and they're like, no, of course you have to patch infrastructure as a service. Run and get that man. Like, because he's like, no, if I buy a Windows box from them and it's a virtual machine and it's running, they have to patch it. I know this is true. I'm like, please go read your agreement, because that's not true, sir. And so like a lot of people, they don't understand. They're like, oh, you know, the cloud provider has to do all these things. You really need to know what they're doing, let them do it, and then you need to do all the rest. And if you're popping super insecure software on top of a platform as a service, you're still in trouble. Yeah, yeah. One thing we also see is how people do not, you know, address this security concern is more and more people installing and using Kubernetes in their private clouds even. And very soon after a pilot that proved successful, they try to jump into production as soon as possible without any addressing any security concerns about admission control, permissions, roles, and stuff like that. So with them trying to
push things to production as soon as possible, they tend to forget these security things, and this is something that we also see in the wild happening a lot.
You're like, and it's bad.
And it's bad, yeah.
I feel like security people need to be involved more in proof of concepts. Like I realize that security people never have enough hours in the day to do every single thing they want to do, but being involved in the selection of new technology, I feel is really, really important, because every time I see a group do a new technology, it's like it's 1999 again as a pen tester. Like, oh, you're doing IoT? This is going to be like shooting fish in a barrel. Awesome. It's like they completely forget they need to write secure code. They're like, I don't need to validate inputs. Yes, you do. And so just like you're saying with Kubernetes, they're like, who needs to do least privilege? You do. And so if an AppSec person could check in on these or be involved somehow with these evaluations, I think that a lot of things could go a lot better. I feel like we have all these, we have all of these people, like you were saying, like rushing to put things into production. And if the security people aren't pushing or shifting all the way left to the beginning, and a proof of concept, like how much further left can you get, right?
Yeah.
And for instance, like if they're choosing a new programming language to write, they're starting a new project, like being in there right at the beginning and helping them choose Rust instead of C, if they're programming right from the beginning so that it's memory safe, or having them choose, Spring Boot instead of struts if they're going to program in Java, like all of these things, if we could be there in the beginning and explain right while they're doing it, instead of coming in after they've done 6 months of research, built a proof of concept, and they're ready to go. And then we're like, no, we really want Spring Boot.
Yeah.
It's just, we end up looking like the enemy. But if you're there at the beginning and you explain like, oh, like there were all these 0 days in 2016, who am I kidding, every year with struts, then like when they understand the risk, because they're smart, right? But they don't have the same training we do. When you have that, then suddenly they're like, oh, damn, maybe we should consider doing this other one instead. It's so much harder when like they've invested a lot of time. I know like a lot of security people are like, oh, that's boring, like evaluating new tech, like that's, I'll do it later when they've narrowed it down. It's like, no, you need to help them narrow it down so that they make the right choice. If you come in after they've spent all this time doing proof of concepts with 3 products, and then you're like, no, after they're, they have a plan and they've procured and all that, it's just like, you're the enemy.
Yeah, it shouldn't look like an exam in school when you come to the professor and he flunks you because you didn't, write your test correctly. So you need to work with those people from the beginning, and it doesn't cost anything to have a security person present at this initial meeting when you choose the technology and talk about those initial concepts.
Yeah, if you have security people, like AppSec people on staff, it's like 1 hour or 2 hours. Such a good investment.
Definitely. How do you, Tanya, help teams in addressing security concerns?
Ooh, that is a wide open question.
Let's say I have a team, and it really struggles with application security. How might you help us?
I find that education really helps. I also find, so for instance, like if they're having similar problems over and over again, then I would probably create a lunch and learn or some sort of presentation on that. And I know that I speak at conferences all over the world, so people are like, oh, it's easy for you to do that. But when I started, I really sucked. It was so bad. So you don't have to be amazing at it. You just have to try really hard to help them.
Yeah.
So showing them, we keep finding, let's say, cross-site scripting. These are the dangers, like this is the type of things that could happen. No, it is not just pop-up boxes, because a lot of software developers believe it's just a pop-up box. And then this, this is how you find it. This is how you fix it. This is how you make sure it never happens. Can you help me stop this bad thing? And then, answering questions, providing support. I also try to tell them I'm always here if you need help. Like if you're doing something and you're not sure, please call me. It would be my pleasure to help you, as opposed to, oh, I don't have time for that. Or like, you have to put money in your project budget to pay my team. Like when you have to do all of those things, then they shy away. I also try, I mean, if I'm allowed to, I'll give them security tools so they can find some things themselves. So OWASP's app is free and it works really well. So that is quite often my tool of choice. Like I'm like, look, you're all little hackers, right? And then it's fun. I also try to give them support in like more, I guess, so everyone responds to different things. So if you can create a secure coding guideline with coding samples, and then eventually move it into some sort of standard. So if you show them like, hey, this is a standard or a guideline that I'm proposing. Can we talk about if you feel this is like reasonable and how much time you would need to be able to like meet this standard, and how can I help you meet it? If there's teams where the help that they need is to understand security is important, because there's some teams where they're just like, yeah, later, that's not important. Like I get paid for features, not for security.
We'll add that later.
Yeah, exactly. For those teams, usually what I try to do is talk about risk. And I don't mean like high level, like if I'm allowed to, I'll talk about security incidents that have happened to their organization and the damage and how much it cost. But if not, then I try to talk about other examples of things that I've lived through or things that have been in the news. And then the huge cost of how much more it is to pay for that security bug when a malicious actor has found it instead of me or them. I saw this talk with Sasha Rodebaum or Divine Ops the other day, and she's like, it costs this much if you find it in requirements and this much if you find, and I have a slide where I do this up until if, a pen tester finds it in production, but my slide, I tell people, oh, but I don't have how much it costs in a breach, because that's exponential. So she found that number. And so she had to make the thing so it's like this, and then this, and then this, and this, and this.
Yeah, I remember that talk. I've seen that, and it was also incredible information for me, this ratio between AppSec people and devs. So there is like one application security person for every, I don't know, 87 developers or something. So tremendous ratio there.
Oh yeah. And also, I mean, it's worse in so many other places. Like I have worked places where there are 1,000 devs and then me.
Congratulations.
You have to like figure out new ways to work, right? Because you have to do like bigger moves if you're going to help more people, because you can't just work with your 87 allotted people, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I would really love to have you in my team. That's for sure. What resources would you recommend to people wanting to dig deeper in security topics?
So I'm going to be extremely biased right now and tell you that everyone should read my blog. And I have a book coming out called Alice and Bob Learn Application Security.
Oh,
and I have courses online. So after you're done reading everything I've created, I would suggest joining your local chapter of OWASP, because I've learned quite a bit from the presentations, but I've found I learned even more from meeting all the amazing humans that attend OWASP and who are part of the OWASP community. I also suggest, sorry for a second, I just hit a little blank. I suggest trying to teach yourself, so figuring out what areas interest you. So that can be the hardest part. And then trying to find a professional mentor. I run this thing on Twitter every Monday called Cyber Mentoring Monday. So there's a hashtag Cyber Mentoring Monday. And basically, so many people within the information security industry are answering people who use this hashtag and then suggesting a book or a blog or videos or meeting with those people and then forming long-term relationships and then helping them become an information security professional or switch within InfoSec to a different group. So for instance, let's say you're AppSec, but you really want to do incident response. It's like, so do I have to take that course from SANS, or is there a cheaper thing that I could do? Like, have you taken it? Did you like it? You know, I've heard great things. Being able to talk to other people who have actually done those things is really, really helpful. Also try to get hands-on experience at your company if you can. So how I learned incident response is I asked really nicely if I could sit in on an incident, and they're like, sure, but don't say anything. Don't, like, just be quiet, little dev. And then partway through the meeting, I was like, I know I wasn't supposed to say anything, but I can read that obfuscated code, and that's injection. And they were just like, what? And then I like wrote a little script to de-obfuscate it. I'm like, see this and this and that's happening. And they're like, okay, you're now part of this incident team. I was like, what? And they're like, finish your script, do this, do that. I was like,
almost like feeling sorry for doing that.
Yeah, and like, so volunteer to help the security team, and if at all possible, report security incidents. I just kept reporting security incidents and policy violations to them until they're like, oh my God, do you want a job? I'm like,
yes, please. That's great. Tanya, can you share with us what are you reading these days, and who are the people you follow also that make you think differently and do better each day?
So I actually just started reading How to Be an Anti-Racist. There's a lot of things happening in America right now, and I already do my best to be an ally to others. And so I already have read lots of books, but I hadn't heard of that one. So I actually literally just started reading that last night. But before that, I read in a row almost every single book by Octavia E. Butler, who's a sci-fi writer, and she's just amazing. I'm also about to read this book, Hidden Valley, about Silicon Valley and like how women in startups have a slightly different experience, because I'm a woman in a startup. I also read over the past year Metrics That Matter, which has really helped me figure out how to do better at everything that I do.
Yeah, that's one.
And The Lean Startup, which is such an amazing book. And then every single thing that Gene Kim has written. So the DevOps Handbook, the Phoenix Project, and the Unicorn Project, and also Accelerate. Oh, I love those books. So I try to do like technical book, pleasure book, technical book, pleasure book. But then sometimes I discover Octavia E. Butler, and then there's like 10 pleasure books in a row.
Yeah, so we are waiting for the Gene's next book to come out. So probably by that time you will be done with these sci-fi things.
Yeah. I also, I follow a lot of people in information security, but I find that on Twitter, a lot of it is about seeing what's happening as opposed to, like, not that many people, I feel, publish as many articles as I wish they would, if that makes sense. Like, I wish that I could write people and say, well, you write an article on this because I'd love to see your thoughts. Maybe I should do that. Just tweet.
Maybe you should, yeah. Maybe you should. I mean, there are a lot of people that need some kind of nudge to do this kind of content creation.
Yeah, or just, I would love to see just a one-pager by every person in InfoSec on their specialty, because like my talk, Pushing Left Like a Boss, and then I wrote a blog series of articles that was 23 series, because I just had so many people say like, no, but what is AppSec? Like, how do I do it? And I was like, oh, I'll just tell you. And then it turned out like it has helped so many people. And then now I'm writing a book because of it. So I think there's a lot of people that have a lot of knowledge that they could share, but they think, oh, I'm not special, or like no one would care. I actually had several senior people in my city tell me that no one would ever want to see my talk, Pushing Left Like a Boss, because they're like, it's just so basic. Everyone already knows that. But I have done that talk 60, 65 times now. Like literally people still constantly ask for, could you just give us the baseline? Just give us the foundation of what is AppSec. And so I feel like those introductory content, so whether it be like a talk or blog articles or whatever it is, like I feel like those are the most important. Like I would love to just read an introductory blog article about, you know, how do you do instant response? I'd just love to see someone else's viewpoint on that, because I learned by doing over and over and over again, and just like hearing war stories and not really having like a course on how to do it. And so, yeah, I would love to see like one pagers by all these brilliant people that I follow.
Yeah, I read recently about a bias called knowledge bias, where people that suffer from it don't actually talk about everything that they know, because they assume that everybody else knows it also, and that it's stupid and very basic, and there is no
Yes.
sense in repeating that stuff all over again. But it's such a waste not to talk about this stuff, because there are definitely people, you know, waiting for this kind of content to come up.
Yeah, like when we have way too many AppSec engineers and they just can't find work because there's too many and we've flooded the industry, then we can stop writing about beginner things, right?
That they will happen, definitely.
I'm not concerned about that happening for you.
Yeah, definitely. Tanya, thank you for your time. SheHacksPurple.dev. So
yes.
people go see and take a look at all the courses and blogs and stuff written there. It's really great. Thank you so much.
Thank you too, Ivan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tanya. Bye.
Bye.